Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Saagar and Ryan with some new bombshell reporting about Venezuela. You definitely want to stay tuned for that one. A lot of moving pieces there and fantastic reporting on your part and Ryan's part. We also have updates with regard to the shutdown. Trump partying away at a Great Gatsby-themed party while food stamp benefits run dry. A judge is intervening and saying that they do have to tap emergency funds to pay out those benefits, so that remains in limbo as we speak this morning. We got a bunch of stuff going on with Kash Patel over at the FBI under fire once again, this time for flying around in a taxpayer-funded private jet in order to see his girlfriend. He is speaking out, responding in a relatively both humiliating and entertaining way. So
yeah, humiliation first, entertaining for the rest of us. But, yeah.
Indeed. We're also taking a look at Fox News, and a bunch of conservative influencers fell for these rage bait welfare queen AI videos. So we'll break that down for you. We are quite cooked when it comes to AI. These videos are getting very believable, apparently. Also, a wild story out of Israel. I'm not even sure how to characterize this one, but you guys remember the whole right to rape riots that unfolded in Israel? Well, now the society is in uproar, furious at the person who leaked the video of the Palestinian being raped by the IDF. There's a lot going on here, so we'll bring you all of the details there. Also have a bunch of updates in the whole Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Heritage Foundation fallout. Conservative world is really experiencing quite a schism over the issue of anti-Semitism and over the issue of Israel. I have thoughts. I want to hear Saagar's thoughts as well, so that'll be an interesting one. We're also going to do our AMA Live today. If you want to be part of those, make sure you sign up at breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber. And also, we have some amazing holiday merch, guys. By popular demand, the holiday sweater and socks are back.
That's right. Let's put them up on the screen.
Yep.
There they are.
If you're a premium member, you get 20% off. Check your for those of you who are premium subscribers, check your email. It should have the discount code there.
That's right. The code will be in there. It is made in the USA and Union, okay? So not like everybody else out there hawking you stuff from China. And I can personally attest to the quality of the socks, who, as I said, the shoe salesman tells me are incredible. He wouldn't lie.
Genuinely loves these.
He would not lie. He would not lie to me about how awesome these socks are. Definitely not trying to sell me a pair of shoes, but nonetheless, I appreciate his compliment. It is great, by the way, to be back on Standard Time. The sun did rise again, and so it's beautiful. Beautiful this morning. It was a gorgeous morning here in Washington. All right, let's go ahead and start with Venezuela. President Trump sat yesterday with 60 Minutes after the Buffalo Bills game, and here's what he said about Nicolas Maduro, saying his days are numbered. Let's take a listen.
That is the world's largest aircraft carrier on the way to the Caribbean. Are we going to war against Venezuela?
I doubt it. I don't think so, but they've been treating us very badly, not only on drugs. They've dumped hundreds of thousands of people into our country that we didn't want. People from prisons, they emptied their prisons into our country. They also, if you take a look, they emptied their mental institutions and their insane asylums into the United States of America, because Joe Biden was the worst president in the history of our country.
But I just want to talk about the scale of the military operation around Venezuela, because it has been described to 60 Minutes as using a blowtorch to cook an egg. Is this about stopping?
Well, I don't think so. Look.
Is it about, let me ask you though, is it about stopping narcotics, or is this about getting rid of President Maduro?
No, this is about many things. This is a country that allowed their prisons to be emptied into our country. To me, that would be almost number one, because we have other countries. Look, Mexico has been very bad to us in terms of drugs, okay? Very bad. We have a closed border right now. You probably noticed that for 5 months in a row, they have zero, think of this, zero people coming into our country through our southern border.
On Venezuela in particular, are Maduro's days as president numbered?
I would say, yeah. I think so, yeah.
And this issue of potential land strikes in Venezuela, is that true?
I don't tell you that. I mean, I'm not saying it's true or untrue, but I wouldn't.
Why would
I
we
wouldn't
do
be
it?
inclined to say that I would do that, but because I don't talk to a reporter.
I would say, yeah, in terms of his days being numbered. We're not going to go to war with Venezuela, but Maduro's days are numbered. By the way, that's just from Donald Trump, who is probably the least belligerent member of his White House on Venezuela, if you can believe it. So we have compiled a number of comments and setting the ground for any potential invasion, regime change, strike, CIA operation, assassination, etc. The craziest one so far is, you will be shocked to learn that Maduro is now Hamas, and in fact is pro-terrorist. This is from the White House counterterrorism advisor Seb Gorka in an interview from the White House lawn. Let's take a listen.
And it is primarily about the drugs, Rob, but it's not just about the drugs. Yeah. I can't talk about the classified aspects of this, but in open source right now, your viewers can go online and they can search for the connections of that regime, the Maduro regime, to other bad actors, other states, other nations who, for example, have been plotting to target members of this administration, including the president. Iran's tentacles into this hemisphere go straight through Caracas.
Iran's tentacles wrap through Caracas, Venezuela. You can't even make this shit up, honestly. And by the way, that's not even the craziest part. We'll get to in a little bit about how they're pro-Iran, they're pro-Russia, they're pro-China, they're pro-Hamas, they're terrorists, but they're drug traffickers. Yeah, they're everything under the sun that you need to facilitate a violent regime change in Venezuela now currently. And I think what I'm just the most galled by is, again, the level of seriousness which I do not think that the mainstream media is taking this. So the strikes, the land strikes, that remains a possibility. We'll get to that in a moment. But the simple fact is, you know, you can look, the State Department on the record gave Ryan and I a statement saying Maduro is not the legitimate leader of Venezuela. It's one of the craziest things I've ever read. You know, literally a total declaration from the United States government, an on the record statement from the spokesperson to Marco Rubio declaring this person illegitimate, said we have a $50 million bounty. Something that many sources and I have been speaking to is that $50 million, you know, the impetus behind that is basically to get every mercenary under the sun to mount some violent operation against Maduro. And so there are all kinds of sketchy Blackwater style guys who are flooding the Caribbean, Guyana and Colombia, buying all sorts of weapons because they want their payday. And so that's the type of thing that we're endorsing. Who knows what will happen if this regime completely collapses and everybody's just acting like it's just pie in the sky and democracy will prevail on day one. I think the opposite's going to happen. And all signs currently point in that direction.
Yeah, well, to your point about the mainstream press, you know, what I saw written up in the New York Times this morning about that 60 Minutes clip we showed you from Trump is, oh, he says we're not going to be at war with Venezuela.
Like, what? No, that's not what he said.
The headline is he said Maduro's days are numbered.
Exactly.
Now, maybe he doesn't want to come out and be like, oh, yeah, we're going to war tomorrow. But we already know from the New York Times reporting, by the way, backed up by Saagar and Ryan, that he has greenlit these CIA operations. We see what's happening with our own eyes with striking these random drug boats, with the bounty that's put on him, with the massing military assets in the region. We know about the internal push. I can't even call it a tug of war. It's just an all-out push towards war and regime change operations in Venezuela. So, you know, when I hear the president of the United States say, yeah, his days are numbered, well, how do you think that you think it's just going to be, oh, an organic uprising of the people in Venezuela? No, that is not remotely what we're talking about here. You know, with regard to the migration piece as well, it's complete insanity. First of all, his whole, like, they opened up the insane asylums. I continue to believe that he actually thinks the asylum process is the same as, like, opening up insane asylums. But, you know, you've had actually a bipartisan project in the U.S. which has pushed a lot of people out of Venezuela to migrate to other countries, including our own. I mean, Marco Rubio and those types, they have been the ones that have, you know, welcomed Venezuelans into the country. Now, I support migration, but I also support people being able to live in their own country and have it not be wrecked by sanctions, onerous sanctions, which are part of what has created the economic misery in that country as well. So in any case, if you have a failed state there and chaos, guess how many people are going to want to leave that country? You're very likely to have an increased migration crisis, which is going to be obviously first and foremost a problem for those individuals who have to flee the area. You're going to have fallout spillover effects for countries in the region and also, you know, for our own country as well. So the whole thing is completely insane, but my mind was blown by the framing from the mainstream press of like, oh, he says he's not going forward with invasion. Everybody calm down. There's not going to be a war. It's going to be fine.
What they mean by that is that they're not going to be a full-scale invasion. And maybe there won't be a full-scale invasion. administration. They don't think that they need to. They think they can militarily pressure him to step down or cause some sort of CIA internal coup inside of the country. By the way, that's way worse, right? Because if you're going to do it, then you need to do it. You need to do it properly, and you need to occupy the country for some 20-odd years. I don't support that, just to be very clear, but that's pretty much the only way that it would ever work. In the meantime, we've got our CIA-backed, people like Maria Machado, who has recently been given the Nobel Peace Prize and is a 100% US-backed. There's no other way to describe it. I'll get to my reporting in a bit about some of the details. I have the exact numbers on the number of dollars that flew into her coffers and the entire Venezuelan opposition over the last 5 years. But listen, this is a very sophisticated political actor. She's now giving interviews saying that Maduro is tied to Hamas, to the Palestinian resistance. He's a terrorist. She supports the land strikes. She has been behind the scenes. I can tell you all in a little bit about the level of support that she's given to the Tren de Aragua accusations, to the drug trafficking accusation. She is the number one force in Washington and around the Western world to push violent regime change so that she herself can assume the presidency and has hundreds of millions of dollars at her disposal. Here's the interview she gave. I mean, it's, again, a parody, literally a parody. Let's take a listen.
For years, we were, asking the world to understand the degree of the threat and this devastation the Maduro regime was building in Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela has been turned into the safe haven for the activities of all criminal international networks, from the drug cartels to the Colombian guerrilla, to those groups that smuggle gold and destroy communities of our indigenous people and the ecology, to networks that smuggle arms, and even human trafficking and child prostitution. This is horrible, what we're living. Russian agents, Iranian agents freely operating in Venezuela, Hezbollah and Hamas being located in our country. And we have asked for years the international community to cut these sources that come from drug trafficking and other criminal activities. Finally, this is happening.
So you think those killings are justified then? That's what I really want to understand. Are they justified, or are they, as the UN would say, extrajudicial killings?
This is about saving lives. And Maduro is absolutely conscious, and he has been warned what not to do. These deaths are the responsibility of Nicolás Maduro.
What about the rights to due process of the people who were on those boats?
I certainly defend the rights of everyone, not only Venezuelans. That's why my voice has been, loud all along this process. But you need to understand, all the international community need to understand that this is a very cruel war. It was Maduro who turned this into an international conflict. Look, when you
Are those people expendable? That's really what I'm wondering. Are those people expendable on the boats?
It was Maduro who insisted on maintaining operations that have consequences. Maduro is not a conventional dictator. We are facing a narco-terrorist structure.
So that's the lady. Pro-Hamas, Maduro's Hamas, Maduro's Iran, Maduro's Russia, Maduro's, anybody bad. You joked the ghost of bin Laden is in Venezuela too. And, let's also just take this at a very basic level. Do you think that, let's say, I don't know if Maduro is popular or not. I have no idea. There's a lot of propaganda and all that out there. I will say this. If you're another country and if you are Venezuela and the United States sanctions you to death for the last 5 to 10 years, you have a huge migration crisis, which I'll also get to in a little bit in terms of the U.S. role in some of that. And now the opposition leader, who you may have had some sort of democratic faith in, is on the record supporting strikes against your countrymen, in addition to being CIA and U.S. backed in some sort of a literal coup that has been acknowledged by the president. Would you, even if you hate Maduro, would you accept that person as your new leader? Solely as a democratic polity with people, tens of millions of people who live in that country, very oil rich, an explicitly stated goal of wanting to take advantage of your mineral resources. Would you allow that person to assume the mantle What self-respecting person could do that? Imagine the United States. You don't like Trump, okay? Well, if the Chinese or some other country like came in, deposed that person, kept it explicitly to try and steal our oil, like, do you not think that even a lot of Democrats and other people who don't like Trump would be like, yeah, I don't know about this.
Yeah,
you know,
I
don't know about all this. If some KGB style assassination explicitly stated out there, I think most Americans would be like, listen, you know, I'm not so thrilled with my president and all that, but I'm not dealing with whatever this is. What do you think is more likely to take up arms against somebody like that? Who do you think is going to meet perhaps, let's say, violent resistance or anti-democratic nature? She's openly supporting the strikes here, which is dramatically unpopular in Venezuela.
She's openly supporting, let's be clear about what this, she is openly supporting the murder of random Venezuelans with no evidence or due process. That's what she's calling for direct U.S. action in Venezuela. Like, that's insane. And this is the lady that, you know, Miss Nobel Peace Prize, this is the lady that you think is going to, you know, be able to unify the country and bring everybody together in this theoretical post-Maduro world. Insane. And I'm so insulted by how like stupid they think we are with their propaganda. Like, you know, Maduro's Hamas, Maduro's Hezbollah, Maduro's Iran, it's Russia, it's the ghost of bin Laden, it's the ghost of Adolf Hitler. I mean, just like, you know, at least in the past, there was some effort for a full-sale, like, propaganda effort to convince the American people of the goodness of our various wars. Here they just slap together, okay, drug trafficking, terrorism, Hezbollah, Hamas. Okay, we got to do it, guys. Let's do, like, don't ask too many questions. We're just going to be off to the races here. And look at this lady. Isn't she amazing? Our new Ahmed Chalabi, ready to go. It's so insane to me, how easy they think we are to manipulate. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, apparently it's true. They just buy it.
We don't live in a democracy anymore. We live in look, I mean, maybe we never did. But the point is that we've always been ruled and governed by elites. The elites who are in power are Marco Rubio and a cabal of South Floridians who have taken over the White House that Trump is somehow susceptible to and has been convinced of this violent takeover for his benefit. He has been convinced that we can get more oil from Venezuela if we overthrow the regime, as opposed to Maduro, who literally is telling us, take whatever you want. This is the thing people don't understand about Maduro. He does not actually care that much about Russia and China. I was not a Latin American expert, but I've now spent literally hours on the phone talking to people who have met him recently. I've spoken with 10 people who have met Nicolas Maduro in the last 6 months. All of them tell me the exact same thing. Maduro does not care about this. He's absolutely willing to sell oil, minerals, gold. He just wants to survive atop his thing. He's even willing to, let's say, step aside in some sort of deal in 2030. Well, he'll go, he'll step aside from the government and, you know, you can have a win-win type situation, but the sort of regime that he has will remain in power. That is literally what's on the table. We're saying no, we're doing this violent drug trafficking narrative instead, which is totally fake. It's fake. Let's go and put a Ryan and I story, please, up on the screen, just so I can kind of go through all of it. This is from Ryan. He got the big scoop here, is that the U.S. expanded drug cartel target list to include Colombian sites amid the Rubio push for Venezuelan regime change. That was from Ryan, is that what they did is that they have expanded the strike list to include on the border with Venezuela and Colombia in addition to Mexico, and that Lindsey Graham is going all over Capitol Hill urging people to support some sort of strikes not only on Venezuela for regime change, but all across Latin America. But here's a portion that I really want everyone to sit with. I got my hands on a bunch of these internal USAID documents, okay, from the last 5 years. And I just want to read to you all the colossal amounts of money that have flowed into the Venezuelan opposition. $213 million over the last 5 years. This is per an internal USAID assessment that I was able to get my hands on just into the Venezuelan opposition. For Machado, $18 million last year alone, including global travel of this recent Nobel Peace Prize tour. This was just 2024. So this is under the Biden administration. In the more recent times, by the way, after Trump disbanded USAID, they redirected $400 million just in September of 2025 to combat ideologically opposed governments in Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. $400 million. So add all that up, we're talking about $600–700 million. In addition, by the way, what did Ryan and I found find in the middle of the appropriations bill. Let me read it to you specifically. Of the funds appropriated by this act under the heading of Economic Support Fund, 50 million shall be made available for democracy programs in Venezuela. That is an increase of 10 million from just the last year. So add all that. This is almost $1 billion that I can verify of just over the last 5 years flowing into Venezuela. Maria Machado, this whole Nobel Peace Prize thing is 100% orchestrated by the United States. And this is part of the bipartisan narrative. Yes, Rubio and Trump are the ones who are taking it a step further. Biden pumped hundreds of mils into the Venezuelan opposition. This whole Juan Guaido regime op that's been going on since 2019 has been flowing now for years, to the point where the entire bipartisan machine just seems to agree that we need to pump all this money into Venezuela, and that regime change itself is an effort which will be successful. It will not be. We learn nothing.
Literally never learn
And,
anything.
you know, again, just to stick with this, is Maduro himself. And I'm not pro-Maduro. I think he's a bad guy, okay? I'm not saying, I'm sure he stole an election. At the end of the day, I don't really care. If he's willing to sell us oil, whatever, okay? There's a lot of bad people all around the world who sell us oil. Saudi Arabia, shocker. It's really funny. Maduro has been telling anybody who will listen, by the way, he's like, I didn't invade you. You destroyed my country with sanctions. And what I uncovered was a USAID contract for September 2023 to July of 2024. I literally got to read the contract to a large Colombian newspaper called El País. And this newspaper was being funded billions of Colombian pesos to run ads about a, quote, new narrative about the Venezuelan migrant population, to document and make visible success of stories of migrants accessing the formal market in Colombia using formats and media regularly consulted by business groups. The justification of that contract was to say that Venezuelans should stay in Colombia. Now, what do the critics of that campaign say? Is that we funded, this is just one of many contracts all across Latin America, which basically encouraged Venezuelans to leave Venezuela. And then once they got to Colombia, they were like, oh, well, maybe we'll try and do this ad psyop to make them stay there. No, what it did is it sucked even more people out of Venezuela to Colombia, Guyana, all of these other neighbors throughout Latin America. And then they came here for TPS, for using the border under Biden. I mean, over 1 million people came here from Venezuela just under Joe Biden. Just to point out, and by the way, not just him, leftists and other people who are currently in power in Colombia have been screaming this from the rooftops, is they're like, look, we agree, the border situation, all that is out of control, but you cannot absolve yourselves of literally funding a group, funding huge ad campaigns across our countries, basically encouraging Venezuelans to leave.
Well,
okay?
Sanctioning the shit out of them to make their lives
making ads.
So they cannot benefit from the vast mineral and oil wealth that they actually have. Engaging all these multi-million dollars of, USAID democracy regime change funds, the whole Juan Guaido thing. And then the ad campaigns effectively encouraging Venezuelan migration.
Yes.
So, and this is where, again, the bipartisan aspect of it, Rubio,
everything I just said happened under Biden.
People, that was Biden, but all Rubio and all the South Florida people, they support all of that.
Yes.
Right? And that's the other thing about all of this. We talked about the mainstream press dropping the ball here, but the supposed opposition party, largely quiet. You got, Mark Pocan, you got Ro Khanna, you got a few lonely voices out there, but you ask yourself, where is the fury? Where is them taking them to task over there? Where is them explaining to the American public what is going on here and how they're being lied to and how they're being snowed? And the reason they're so quiet is because a lot of them kind of sort of agree with it. They're okay with it. Or they think, oh, this is not the political place to fight or whatever, which to me is insane. But there is a lot of support, a lot of bipartisan support for this insane leftover Cold War mentality and this fantasy belief that somehow this time the regime operation is going to be different.
Why can't we just say that opposing regime change in Venezuela is not an endorsement of Nicolas Maduro? Why is that so difficult? It's not. Yes, he's a bad guy. There are bad people all over the world. We make deals with them on an everyday basis. He's willing to sell us a shit pot of oil and gold.
Yeah, we're working with the freaking Al-Qaeda guy in Syria.
I was going to say, if we can live with a guy who literally slaughtered U.S. soldiers in Iraq, as in Syria because he's pro-Israel, we can live with anything. Same, like, oh, he stole an election. They don't have elections in Saudi Arabia or in Qatar. Guess what? We buy shit tons of LNG and oil. It's not my problem. What? In Turkey, yes, Turkey, Erdogan, I'm sure he's stolen multiple elections or whatever at this point. Yeah, well, Incirlik Air Force Base is really important. We have nuclear weapons there. Deal with it, okay? We've had military coups and military dictatorship there since the 1970s, whatever. Okay, this is the point. The inconsistency around all of this is so insane. And now it's about drugs. Like, no, this is 150% a bipartisan regime change, USAID, CIA op. It will end in the same way that it always does. You really think the Venezuelans are going to accept this, CIA-funded woman who encourages and wants the murder of her own countrymen? How can you possibly think that that is going to go over well? Let me tell you a little story about Lula. Lula, not doing so well down in Brazil, actually, before Trump came in. Then what happened? Trump slapped the shit out of him with sanctions, and Lula's more popular than ever. Okay? He's more popular than ever.
Oh, look at Canada.
Little story I heard about Colombia is that Petro is desperate for Trump to sanction him because he wants to get reelected. He's not actually doing so well down in Colombia. Part of the reason he's been mouthing off so much is he wants Trump to come in and to sanction him because the populations around Latin America are sick of this. They can see it and they're watching what's happening. And that's the final thing in terms of the whole Monroe Doctrine. I strongly believe in the Monroe Doctrine, but part of that is also that increasingly engaging in this same bipartisan regime change throw ops over and over again has dramatically undermined U.S. security in Latin America. It has mass encouraged violent, migration and other to the United States, which cause a demographic and political crisis here. Put that all together. It's like, how can you possibly say that that's successful? So,
can you talk, Saagar, a little bit about you and Ryan's reporting with regard to the target bank, including targets in Colombia and targets in Mexico as well? Because effectively what you and Ryan reported is, since they're using this whole pretext of drugs, and there isn't a lot of actual drug trafficking in Venezuela at all, when they were, people were tasked with coming with, okay, we'll find us some targets, they were like, well, there's not a lot
There's no targets in Venezuela.
But we do have some in Mexico, we have some in Colombia. So can you talk about that aspect of it and what that means?
Totally, yeah. This is a hilarious little side story as well, is that Trump has recently found out there is no fentanyl in Venezuela. And so even though he's apparently okay with these strikes, actually, let's put this next one, please, on the screen. This was about the U.S. poised to strike military targets in Venezuela in escalation. This was a Miami Herald report. The administration denied it, just to be clear, but clearly Miami Herald, they've got some good sources down there in South Florida. The story, as I understand it, is that there was like a go, no-go situation. It did eventually calm down over the weekend, but in the next few days to a week, you can definitely watch. One of the reasons is that a lot of those warships do eventually need to return to port or where they came from, so they're on actually a limited timeline for the amount of time they can stay out there, absent some crazy circumstance if they want to keep them there. But to your point about what you were saying, the reason why Colombia and Mexico have now increasingly been extended in the target list is there is no fentanyl or cocaine that's really coming from Venezuela. There's just not a lot that comes from there. It's like 7%. This is from the DEA's own 2025 report. I tweeted it. You can go read it for yourself if you want to. It's publicly available. It's pretty hard to find. The point that you read from that document, though, and the reason why many of the more recent strikes from the U.S. have shifted to the Pacific Ocean is those actually are cocaine routes from Colombia to Mexico. Now, a lot of the cocaine will come from Colombia to Mexico. Mexico is where the fentanyl comes in. They use the precursors from China, and then the absolute vast majority of it crosses the U.S.-Mexico border, not by sea. It almost all comes by land. Now, in terms of the strike packages that have been prepared, a lot of them, the fact that any cocaine which is moving from Colombia to Venezuela is happening on that border. A lot of it has nothing to do really with Maduro. This is like some guerrilla, this is jungle stuff. Like that, it's kind of hard to explain for a lot of people. But it's effectively like a lawless no man's land down there, and that is where to the extent you can find a Venezuelan connection, it's there on the border, and it's a lot more with the Colombians. Now, internally, what I'm told is that Mexico and Colombia, even though they're the most legitimate strike targets for the U.S., you would cause huge political problems. So as I just explained, Trump does not want to sanction Petro. Why? He doesn't want him to get reelected. He doesn't want the leftists to win. If we strike Colombia, it's game. It's going to be a socialist takeover down in Colombia. Sheinbaum is massively popular. She's actually playing ball right now. If we strike Mexico, first of all, economic consequences could be a disaster because of the NAFTA and the amount of trade that we do down in Mexico. They could cripple our economy if they wanted to. But two is that it would solidify the Sheinbaum regime even more than it already is and make the leftist parties even more popular down in Mexico. So the administration is aware of this to a certain extent. Brazil massively backfired on them. They did not expect the Bolsonaristas to dip in popularity and for Lula's popularity to go up as a result of the sanctions. So I don't think it's going to happen personally. I do think if anything does happen, it'll be in Venezuela. But the Venezuelan regime change thing, it's here. I mean, Trump is now saying his days are numbered. He seems to believe all of this. We potentially maybe have one or two more off-ramps, but I'm not feeling very good about it. I think we have maybe 14 days right now is a very critical time. That's why we're spending a lot of time on this right now.
Yeah. Let's take a look at A6. This was an important report from the Washington Post about the legal justification. So the headline here, Trump administration tells Congress war law does not apply to cartel strikes. So effectively, they say the president needs lawmakers' approval for sustained military action under the 1973 War Powers Resolution, which was passed in the wake of the Vietnam War. A 60-day clock started ticking after the administration informed Congress on September 4th that it had conducted a strike on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean 2 days earlier. It's followed that with other strikes that's killed dozens of people. That 60-day window closes today. And until now, it had been unclear what the administration would do. And so basically the administration is saying, we don't have to follow that law. We don't have to notify you. We don't classify this as meeting the requirements under this War Powers Resolution. So they continue to claim the ability to, do all of these random extrajudicial assassinations with no due process indefinitely without having to go to Congress whatsoever. Congress is probably not all that upset about it because of the reasons that we just were mentioning, that, they don't like to have to make difficult decisions and have their fingerprints on this. There is a more or less bipartisan acceptance of the general thrust of, hey, let's get rid of Maduro. So they're probably not going to protest too much. There are a couple other interesting notes in this piece. I mean, number one, what the administration is actually claiming here, which is something I've been saying for a while, is that they can assassinate any person that they claim to be tied to the drug trade. Okay, that's what they're claiming, and not just at sea. What they're asserting is that they can murder anyone they want domestically here in the U.S. with no due process, as long as they say, oh, but they were related to drug trafficking. They were related to a drug cartel. Were giving material support to drug cartels. That's their view of their legal abilities, which is insane. Also, just a little nugget in here, there was supposed to be a briefing where the military lawyers come in and sort of brief Congress on the legal rationale. That didn't happen. And originally Congress felt like, oh, they're just stonewalling us. But the reality was that the legal experts were not comfortable with the legality of it and didn't want to have to go and do this briefing. So to give you a sense of how much tumult there is in terms of the career officials and lawyers who've been involved in this process. And of course, we saw one high up, military commander who was pushed out over his objection to some of these things as well. So, I mean, what they're claiming here is absolutely insane, even putting the Venezuela piece aside and focusing here domestically.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Ryan had some stuff on that as well, by the way, in the report. So, look, that's where things are as of right now. We really don't know yet where things could go. It's still possible we could reopen some talks with Maduro. I think it's going to be very difficult. You can see it as a massive pressure campaign, but every single day that this goes on, it just gets more dangerous. Who knows what kind of crazy black ops mercenary thing is going to be happening inside Venezuela
right now.
I have no clue. Yeah, exactly. I mean, on the Venezuelan side too, for ostensibly anybody who cares about the opposition, as I've explained, you know what Maduro says? Maduro is doing backflips when we do the CIA announcement, because then anyone opposes him is who? CIA. This is what the Iranians did after the Mossad targeted assassinations. Any person in Iran who spoke out against the regime, now they're Mossad, and they literally just kill them. That's what Maduro is doing, is throw them all in jail. He's gonna kill them. This is the best gift you've ever given for the regime. He's also coup-proofing himself increasingly. Most of the people around him at this point have been so tested. And, you know, I mean, there's a recent story where we tried to buy off his pilot to try and fly him to the United States from the CIA. And the pilot was basically playing them off, trying to get some cash, but he eventually told Maduro. He saved him. So he has a pretty good cocoon around him to protect himself at this point. And I don't think he's going anywhere, personally. So we'll see. No. All right, let's get to the shutdown.
Trump disagrees with you, so we'll see how that goes.
Well, I don't think he's going anywhere voluntarily.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, indeed.
Is he going to die? Very possible. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.